Resolution 150, which I introduced with Senator Cruz to recognize the Armenian Genocide. I'm glad he's with me today to call for unanimous consent on this resolution. We're proud to report that we have 28 sponsors on this important resolution. Last month, the House of Representatives passed a version of this resolution by a vote of 405 to 11. 405 to 11. That sent a strong bipartisan message of dedication to the truth, dedication to historical fact, dedication to a principle held by so many in Congress that genocide is genocide. As a country, we should do whatever we can to prevent future genocides. But when it happens, we have an obligation as a country to call it what it is. If not, we operate without the facts, outside of reality. We aren't being honest to ourselves and to the world. This resolution gives us the reckoning and sets the record straight, a record that so many administrations over years have sought to obscure. These administrations, Republican and Democrats, have dug their heads in the sand despite the words of U.S. diplomats who were there at the time, who saw the genocide with their own eyes. And let me just share a couple of examples. Henry Morgenthau, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey from 1913 to 16, wrote in his memoir that, quote, "When the Turkish authorities gave the order for these deportations, they were merely giving the death warrant to a whole race. They understood this well, and in their conversations with me, they made no particular attempt to conceal this fact. I am confident that the whole history of the human race contains no such horrible episode as this. The great massacres and persecutions of the past seem almost insignificant when compared to the sufferings of the Armenian race in 1915. That was Henry Morgenthau, our ambassador's quote. On June 5, 1915, the United States Consul in Aleppo, Jesse Jackson, wrote to Ambassador Morgenthau, quote, "There is a living stream of Armenians pouring into Aleppo from the surrounding towns and villages, the principal ones being Maresh, Satun, Hazembili, Osmania, Bagesh, Adana, Dorchal, Hajin. The Ottoman government has been appealed to by various prominent people, and even by those in authority, to put an end to these conditions, under the representations that it can only lead to the greatest blame and reproach, but to all to no avail. It is without doubt a carefully planned scheme to thoroughly extinguish the Armenian race," close quote. On July 24, 1915, in a report to Ambassador Morgenthau, the U.S. Consul in Harput, Leslie Davis, stated that, quote, "Any doubt that may have been expressed in previous reports as to the government's intention in sending away the Armenians have been removed. It has been no secret that the plan was to destroy the Armenian race as a race. Everything was apparently planned months ago," close quote. And finally, in October 1st of 1916, a telegram to the Secretary of State, Robert Lansing, the U.S. Charge d'Affaires, Hoffman Phillip, wrote, quote, "The department is in receipt of ample details demonstrating the horrors of the anti-Armenian campaign. For many months past, I felt that the most efficacious method of dealing with the situation from an international standpoint would be to flatly threaten to withdraw our diplomatic representative from a country where such barbarous methods are not only tolerated, but actually carried out by order of the existing government," close quote. And finally, Abram Elkis, who served as the U.S. ambassador to the Ottoman Empire from 1916 to 17, telegrammed the Secretary of State at the time on October 17, 1916, stating, quote, "In order to avoid opprobrium of the civilized world, which the continuation of massacres of the Armenians would arouse, Turkish officials have now adopted and are executing the unchecked policy of extermination through starvation, exhaustion, and brutality of treatment hardly surpassed even in Turkish history," close quote. American officials, those with the credible and legitimate understanding of what took place, made these statements. They are part of the historical record. They mark one of the prouder moments in the history of the State Department and our diplomacy. And finally, Mr. President, there are 27 countries in the world that have already recognized the Armenian Genocide. 11 of them are NATO countries: Belgium, Canada, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Poland, Slovakia. None of them have ruptured their relationship with Turkey. None of them have ended their relationship with Turkey as it relates to recognizing the Armenian Genocide as a historical fact. Why is the greatest country on the face of the earth, the United States of America, incapable of doing this when these 11 NATO countries have? So I want to thank the many individuals over the years, particularly for the Armenian National Committee of America, the Armenian Assembly, and so many others who've worked so hard alongside with me to ensure the U.S. abide by its commitment to the truth and to a world where genocide truly never happens again. And in this respect, I've had a good friend and colleague who has been engaged with me in this latest effort, and I want to yield to him at this time. Senator Cruz.
Mr. President.
For Texas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm proud to join with my friend and colleague from New Jersey today in urging the Senate to take up and pass the resolution affirming United States recognition of the Armenian Genocide. From 1915 to 1923, the Ottoman Empire carried out a forced deportation of nearly 2 million Armenians, of whom 1.5 million were killed. It was an atrocious genocide. That it happened is a reality that no amount of political doublespeak can cover up. In fact, the word genocide, which literally means the killing of an entire people, was coined by Raphael Lemkin to describe the horrific nature of the Ottoman Empire's calculated extermination of the Armenians. That's the genesis of the word genocide. As America, we must never be silent in response to atrocities. Over 100 years ago, the world sat silently as the Armenian people suffered and were systematically murdered. And many people today are still unaware of what happened. With this resolution, a bipartisan resolution, we are saying it is the policy of the United States to commemorate the Armenian Genocide through official recognition and remembrance. And let me echo what my colleague from New Jersey just said. Doing so is not incompatible with continuing to deal with Turkey as an ally. Just last week, I sat down with President Erdogan and President Trump in the Oval Office. Turkey is a NATO ally and an important one. But friends and allies can speak the truth. And we are not honoring America and who we stand for if we are afraid to speak the truth and willing to participate in covering it up. We have a moral duty to acknowledge what happened to 1.5 million innocent souls. It is the right thing to do, and it's my hope that the Senate will do so in a bipartisan manner. And I yield back the floor.
President.
The Senator for New Jersey.
Therefore, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-Res 150. The Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President?
The Senator for Georgia.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, just yesterday, Secretary Pompeo joined the foreign ministers of NATO headquarters in Brussels, including Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu from Turkey. Secretary Pompeo had quite a lot to discuss with him as this administration continues its engagement with Turkey's leadership on the heels of President Trump's meeting with President Erdogan just last week. In light of these diplomatic efforts, I respectfully object to this resolution at this time. While the content of the legislation before us certainly measures undivided consideration, its passage today would undermine the administration's commitment to overcoming real challenges in our bilateral relationship with Turkey. I look forward to working with the administration and Senators Cruz and Senator Menendez in holding our NATO ally responsible for its commitment made when it joined NATO, the community of like-minded nations founded on the principle of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. For those reasons, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator for New Jersey.
Mr. President, I'm not new to this issue. I have been pursuing recognition of the Armenian Genocide for the greater part of a decade. And there always seems to be some reason why, in fact, it's not a propitious moment. Well, you know, it's like a rope-a-dope. It's like a rope-a-dope. Always another reason, always another excuse. If the 13 or so NATO allies, 11 I should say, NATO allies have done this and they're still in NATO and still working with Turkey and still have diplomatic relationships with Turkey, it is amazing to me that the greatest superpower on the face of the earth just can't speak truth of history. It's amazing to me. And so there never seems to be a good moment. Now, I've been here in the Senate long enough to know that objections to unanimous consent work both ways. And so I am going to continue to bring this issue to the floor. I think Armenian Americans, the world, and history should record who stands on the side of recognizing genocide for what it is and who does not. And so I'm not going to relent. And if necessary, I'm sure there'll be moments in which those will seek consent on issues. And if the only way is to get a vote on this through an actual process on the floor, then I will force that issue because history demands it, our conscience should call for it, and a decade of waiting to make this happen is enough. And with that, I yield the floor.